Late afternoon. Golden sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the 27th floor office at Innovis headquarters. Leonel, a 42-year-old black CEO in a dark tailored suit that perfectly fit his tall frame, sat pensively before his laptop screen. An email had just popped up with a short, pointed subject line: Invitation to the Morning Exchange, a nationally broadcast television program. Millions of viewers every morning. And now, they wanted him to sit in the guest chair to discuss the rise of black entrepreneurs. Real talent or special treatment? That line made Leonel frown instantly. He was used to the handshakes behind the scenes, the token trophies for diversity success, the scripted speeches, followed by silence. Another performance, huh? He muttered. Tasha, Leonel's trusted assistant, entered with a stack of files. She glanced at the screen and sighed. Are you sure about this? These kinds of shows love to praise you for 5 minutes, then hit you with a question that's been prepped to knock you down. Leonel swiveled in his chair, eyes sharp and steady. They're setting up a chessboard, aren't they? Tasha shrugged. And they think you're just the lone black pawn on it. Leonel gave a calm smile, unbothered. He tapped the keyboard and replied to the email with a single line. I'll join. See you tomorrow morning. Then he looked up, his voice resolute. If they're playing chess, they're about to learn they picked the wrong opponent. 7:15 a.m. the next morning. Los Angeles. A sleek black SUV pulled up at the gates of KXNT Studios. Leonel stepped out, postured upright, dressed in a charcoal gray suit with a black tie neatly fastened over a crisp white shirt. Everything about him radiated control, from the way he walked to the intensity in his eyes. Except for one thing. He knew this interview was far from harmless. The door to the makeup room swung open. A young assistant with a blank expression gestured stiffly. Right this way, Mr. Bell. We'll mic you up in 5 minutes. No warm greeting, no small talk, no eye contact. Everything was cold and mechanical, as if he were just a background character stepping into a script already written. Leonel sat in front of the mirror. The makeup artist began dusting powder onto his forehead, quick, practiced hands, but not a polite nod or word. Everything here was robotic, impersonal, icy. The show was broadcasting its earlier segments on a small TV screen mounted on the wall. A humorous cooking demo, a celebrity scandal debate, and then the headline appeared. Coming up, the rise of black entrepreneurs, true talent or special treatment. Leonel narrowed his eyes, his hands clenched quietly on his lap. Not from nerves, but because he now saw clearly what he was walking into. This wasn't a conversation. It was a televised trial. A soft knock at the door. Time, Mr. Bell. They're ready for you on set. Leonel stood. His stride was steady, assured. If they had come to test the worthiness of a successful black man on national television, they were about to witness the answer. In every word, every glance, every breath. He hadn't come to defend himself. He came to dismantle the frame they thought they could trap him in. The studio lights were soft, but they did nothing to mask the tension in the air. At the center of the stage was a transparent glass round table, where Leonel sat across from Lauren, the seasoned host with a polished smile and eyes sharp as a scalpel. Every question she asked was designed to elevate just enough. Before slicing down, Lauren opened with a sweet tone. We're honored to welcome Mr. Leonel, CEO of Innovis, a true American dream success story. Leonel gave a slight nod. Thank you for having me. Lauren gently flipped a cue card. Innovis recently secured a $200 million federal contract, beating out several major tech corporations. A notable victory, but one that sparked some controversy. She looked up, and her gaze cooled. There are those who say Innovis benefited from racial diversity initiatives, that the win wasn't about superior performance, but about checking a quota box. Leonel paused for just a beat, then smiled. Interesting. When a white company lands a contract, it's called exceptional performance. But when a black company wins, it's instantly suspected of receiving special treatment. The studio fell silent. Cameras blinked. Producers behind the glass exchanged looks. Lauren kept her smile, but her eyes sharpened. So, in your view, race played no role at all? Leonel tilted his head slightly, voice deep and steady. Let me ask you this instead. When Elon Musk wins a NASA contract, does anyone wonder if it's because he's white? When Jeff Bezos signs defense deals, does anyone question where he comes from? He paused. Then, he delivered his conclusion. That question only gets asked when the CEO looks like me. No one in the audience moved. No one dared. But the atmosphere had shifted. Leonel wasn't backing down, and Lauren wasn't used to that. Lauren leaned back slightly, crossed her legs, and flipped through her cue cards like a fox watching its prey for the slightest slip. Leonel, you grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Poor family, single mother, public schools, no Ivy League degree, no industry connections. So how does someone like you end up landing a defense contract worth hundreds of millions? The question came out sounding innocent, but everyone knew it was a blade sharpened long ago. The real implication. Who pulled you up? Leonel stayed composed, leaning forward slightly, eyes locked on Lauren. Oh, I had help. Sure. Lauren raised an eyebrow. Help looked like working 3 jobs while attending night school for an engineering degree. Help was sleeping in the office because I couldn't afford rent. Help was getting rejected 43 times before landing my first investor. That's the kind of help I got. Behind the cameras, one of the producers gave a quiet nod. But Lauren wasn't finished. Still, don't you think there might have been someone who helped along the way? A mentor, a connection, a special relationship that opened a door? Leonel gave a short laugh, tinged with irony. Oh yes, I had relationships, with the fear of failure, the pressure to survive, and the reality that someone like me is never allowed to make a mistake. He paused, looked directly at her. Because I don't have the luxury to fail, not like so many others do. Lauren's hand tightened slightly on her cue cards, but her smile didn't break. Still, viewers could feel it. The balance of power had shifted. This wasn't just a profile of a CEO anymore. It was becoming an indictment of the system. And Lauren was no longer in control of the air in the room. Lauren tilted her head slightly. Her lips still held a smile, but her eyes had turned colder. Some argue that the media is giving excessive attention to black entrepreneurs. They say that stories of black resilience are easier to spotlight, easier to sensationalize, while thousands of white entrepreneurs work just as hard but receive no recognition. What's your take? Leonel laughed. But it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had heard the same tired refrain so many times it had become absurd. Ah, so now someone like me gets too much attention? He leaned back slightly, eyes sweeping across the studio, now silent and holding its breath. In a world where 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men, where the vast majority of venture capital goes to startups founded by white men, and this is when we're worried about who's getting too much attention. Leonel lifted his gaze, looking straight into the camera lens. We're not being favored. You just never looked closely enough at people like me. The air in the studio froze. One producer reached for their earpiece, about to cue a segment switch. But the director waved them off. This was what audiences wouldn't look away from. Lauren, still wearing her professional expression, showed the slightest hesitation. I'm simply reflecting public sentiment. What's being said in society? Leonel tilted his head, voice soft as a breeze. Yet each word sliced like a blade. And where does that sentiment come from? From those who've never had to fight against bias? or from those who only notice injustice when their privilege is questioned? With every answer, Leonel wasn't just reshaping the interview. He was flipping an entire storytelling system that had stood untouched for far too long. Lauren took a deep breath, then calmly placed her stack of cue cards aside. No more hiding behind the mask of public opinion. She looked directly at Leonel, ready to deliver her final blow. Leonel, I think it's only fair to look at this story from all angles. You've talked about injustice, about barriers, but isn't it also fair to say that you yourself are living proof that this system may no longer be biased? She paused deliberately, letting the question settle into the minds of viewers. Because if the system truly didn't allow Black people to rise, then how did someone like you, raised in a working-class neighborhood in Birmingham, no Ivy League degree, no elite connections, become the CEO of a tech company beating billion-dollar corporations? It sounded like a simple question, but it was a blade wrapped in velvet. The underlying message: if you made it, the system isn't that bad. Leonel stayed silent for a few moments. Then he leaned forward slowly, his voice deep and steady, like a war drum. You know, he said, people love to use a single success story to deny an entire fire. He turned toward the camera, his gaze sharp as steel. If someone escapes a burning building, what do you say? See? It wasn't that dangerous? Or do you ask, why was the whole building on fire in the first place? The studio held its breath. Not a sound. No director cues in the earpieces. Just silence. Heavy. Loaded. Leonel continued. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut to the deepest parts of the audience. Me sitting here doesn't mean the system is fair. It means one thing. I had to fight twice as hard, 3 times as long, just to be seen as deserving. Lauren pressed her lips together. Her once flawless confidence had begun to crack. If the system were truly fair, I wouldn't have had to work 3 jobs while in college. I wouldn't have had to sleep in my office because I couldn't afford rent. And I wouldn't have to keep answering the question over and over again. Do you really deserve this contract? Leonel looked up and delivered his final line. I didn't succeed because of the system. I succeeded despite it. The room remained still. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a declaration, a counterstrike no one saw coming, and no one could stop. Leonel leaned slightly back in his chair, but his eyes never left Lauren. He knew this moment wasn't just about defending himself. It was time to expose a truth that America had spent decades avoiding. Lauren, he began, his voice calm, but weighted like an indictment. Do you know that a white CEO can run a company into bankruptcy, lay off thousands of workers, and still get hired somewhere else? Lauren swallowed almost imperceptibly. But Leonel didn't pause for a response. Meanwhile, a Black CEO only needs 1 bad quarter, 1 missed projection, and they're immediately labeled incompetent, not ready for leadership. The air in the studio stood still. A few crew members quietly froze in place. No one moved. Leonel leaned forward, his voice low, but every word landed like a gavel. And the most absurd part? When we finally overcome all of that, when we build something better, when we outperform, when we land multi-million-dollar contracts, you still sit here and ask, did you get special treatment? He looked straight at Lauren. She didn't respond. She couldn't. You call that a fair question? Leonel continued, now revealing a dry, cutting smile. I call it systematic deflection, the way people protect their own privilege by questioning someone else's merit. The cameras were still rolling. No one dared cut to the commercial. And then Leonel delivered the final blow. You want to talk about fairness? Then let's start by telling the truth. Lauren, the sharp, unshakable host, had no words left. Her eyes flickered, not because Leonel had raised his voice, but because he had told the truth. There was no defense against it. and the millions watching across the country. They weren't just hearing Leonel. They were being woken up. Just hours after the broadcast ended, social media exploded like never before. Leonel Bell skyrocketed to the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Clips of him looking straight into the camera, asking, "If someone escapes a burning building, do you say, 'See, it wasn't that dangerous'?" Were shared millions of times by celebrities, politicians, students, and everyday citizens. Status updates poured in. He wasn't angry. He was honest. This isn't just about Leonel. It's about all of us. Lauren represents the old media. Leonel is the voice of a new era. But alongside the praise came the backlash. On Facebook and conservative forums, a wave of fury rose. Another one playing the race card. Everyone struggles. Why act like being black is some disadvantage? If he's so talented, why all the complaining? The media fractured into a battlefield of headlines and opinion pieces. CNN ran the headline, "Leonel Bell and the conversation America has avoided for too long." Fox News fired back, "Entrepreneur or activist? Did Leonel go too far?" Inside Innovis, the phones rang off the hook. On one side, new investors, people who saw a bold figure unafraid to speak the truth in Leonel. On the other, worried partners. A significant financial firm announced they were reevaluating the partnership. And then, the first threat arrived. An unmarked package was placed at the doorstep of Innovis headquarters. Inside, there was only one piece of paper, with a single word printed in bold. "Enough, Tasha." Leonel's closest aide held the paper in trembling hands. "You need security, starting today." Leonel nodded, not surprised, not afraid. He knew this truth far too well. When a black man dares to speak the truth, the price isn't applause. It's silence enforced by fear. But this time, he wasn't staying silent. Because of this was only the beginning. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the glass towers of Innovis headquarters, Tasha walked into the office with a thick folder in hand. Her face was tense, but laced with a spark of excitement. "They sent an invitation." "Who did?" Leonel looked up from his desk. "The National Broadcasting Network. They want you to host a special segment, a live nationwide town hall. Topic: race, success, and the system." Leonel didn't respond immediately. He stared silently out the window, down at the city in motion below. Beneath the skyline, millions of people moved. People still trying to climb from the lowest floors of society, just like he once did. People who just needed someone to speak for them. Tasha said cautiously, "They want to air it during prime time. You'd be the moderator. But their condition is, they control the content." Leonel let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Of course they do. They want a balanced view, as long as every angle tilts in their favor." He stood and walked to the window, taking a deep breath. "We're not doing this to ride a media wave," he said, voice low but firm. "We're doing this to change how America looks at the truth." Tasha asked, "So, will you accept?" Leonel turned, his gaze locked in. "Yes, but only on my terms." "And those are?" "I'll do it, but they don't get to define the story." That afternoon, Leonel sent his official response to the network. "No editing my words, no scripted questions, no cutting the broadcast without permission. And it's not an interview. It's a real conversation, with real people, black entrepreneurs, factory workers, students, the unemployed, and yes, white CEOs too." The network hesitated, but they couldn't say no. Because now, Leonel wasn't just a tech CEO. He had become the symbol of a national reckoning, a voice that couldn't be silenced, a question that couldn't be dodged, and a moment that had already become a movement. The night of the special broadcast, Leonel, the System and Justice, began in an eerie stillness, like a storm holding its breath. On national television, a minimalist stage was set in the center of a circular hall, where Leonel stood alone under a soft amber spotlight. No suit, no tie, just him and the truth. There was no upbeat music, no opening applause. The screen displayed a conversation without evasion. Leonel began, voice warm but resolute. "I'm not here to retell a success story. I'm here to ask a question. How many people have had to stay silent for one black voice to be heard finally?" The room was so quiet, you could hear someone breathe. He continued, "I used to be a boy on a bike delivering newspapers in Birmingham, a neighborhood where nobody dared to dream of Harvard, let alone Silicon Valley. Not because we weren't smart, but the system was never built to open its doors for us." The camera panned across the guest panel. A single mother denied a business loan for insufficient creditworthiness. A black college student who lost his scholarship after protesting campus injustice. A former white CEO who admitted, "I got more chances in life because I looked like the people approving them." Lauren, the host of the Morning Exchange, sat in the audience. She didn't interrupt, she didn't steer, she just listened. Leonel dropped facts no one could ignore. Less than 2% of venture capital goes to black-owned startups. Black college graduates still face double the unemployment rate of white individuals without a degree. And every time we accomplish something, the first question is, what kind of special treatment did you get? He paused, looked straight into the camera. His eyes held no rage, only pain and resolve. "I don't need the world to call me exceptional. I need a world where my ordinary can exist and succeed." On social media, millions watched. The #sign, Truth with Leonel, began trending across platforms. "If the system is broken," Leonel said, "we can't just swap out the people in charge. We have to change how the system is built." He didn't incite rebellion. He didn't attack anyone. He just voiced what so many have thought, but had never heard said on national television. When the broadcast ended, there was no applause, just silence. The kind of silence that comes with recognition, when people finally see themselves in the shards of a shattered mirror. 3 months later, a bill was proposed in Congress, requiring major corporations to disclose data on racial equity in opportunity and funding publicly. A year later, a national support network for minority-owned businesses launched, the Leonel Initiative. And today, when people speak of Leonel Bell, he's not just remembered as the CEO who took encryption tech to new heights. He's the man who once sat across from a media veteran and forced a nation to listen. Because justice doesn't come from waiting for systems to change. It comes when we rise and begin changing them ourselves. If you believe this story needs to be heard, share it. And if you believe our other Leonels out there waiting to be heard, don't stay silent. Start with a single question. Is this truly justice, or just an illusion?